I'm spending a lot of time with people with addiction problems in Vegas. And someone I really love died last summer. And one of the things that makes me so crazy is in the research from my book about this, I went to places where my friend Tommy and so many other people would have lived and not died. So Portugal, for example, in the year 2000, Portugal had one of the worst drug problems in the whole world. 1% of the population was addicted to heroin, which is mind-blowing, right? You walk down the street, 1 in every 100 people had 1%.
Okay.
Staggering. They were top of the European league tables for there were 27 European countries at the time, top of all the league tables for death, right? And overdose and addiction. And every year they tried our way more, the American way more. They arrested more people, they imprisoned more people, they shamed more people. And every year the problem...
classic war on drugs that has failed here in America.
Exactly. Well, it's worked so fucking well, hasn't it? Exactly. And then one day, the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition got together and they were like, look, we can't carry on like this. What are we going to do? So they decided to do something really radical, something no one had done in more than 70 years since the global war on drugs began. They were like, should we ask some scientists what we should do? So they set up a panel of scientists and doctors led by an amazing man I got to know in Portugal named Dr. João Gulao. And they said to them, you guys go away, figure out what would solve this problem, and we've agreed in advance with all the political parties that we'll do whatever you recommend. So it just took it out of politics. So the panel goes away, they look at all the evidence, including Rat Park, the experiment we were just talking about. And the panel comes back and says, you're going to think we're crazy, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to decriminalize all drugs, from cannabis to crack, everything, but, and this is the crucial next step, we're going to take all the money we used to spend on fucking people up more, shaming them, imprisoning them, arresting them, putting them on trial, and we're going to spend all that money instead on helping them turn their lives around. And interestingly, it wasn't mostly what we think of as drug treatment in the US. They did a little bit of residential rehab, which has value. Most of it was about getting people back to work. Say you used to be a mechanic, you got an addiction problem. They go to a garage, they say, if you employ this guy for a year, we'll pay half his wages. The goal was to say to every single person with an addiction problem in Portugal, we love you, we value you, we're on your side, we want you back. And by the time I went to Portugal, it was 13 years since this had begun, and the results were in. Best research was done by the British Journal of Criminology, who don't have a dog in this fight. They found that Portugal had gone from having the worst overdose death in the European Union to being almost the bottom of the league table. Addiction was down by more than 50%. Overdose deaths were down by more than 80%. There was just an enormous transformation. And one of the ways you know it works so well is that almost nobody in Portugal wants to go back. I went and interviewed a guy called João Figueira, who was the top drug cop in Portugal at the time of the decriminalisation. And he said what loads of people totally understandably say when you say, let's decriminalise all drugs. He said, this is insane. We'll have a huge increase in children using drugs. This is a nightmare. We can't do it. He said to me, everything I said would happen didn't happen. And everything the other side said would happen did. And he said he felt really ashamed when he looked back that he realised he spent so many years making people's lives worse when he could have been helping them make their lives better. And this is something I saw all over the world, from Uruguay to Switzerland to Portugal. When countries move beyond the war on drugs, at first it is super controversial. People think you're fucking insane. And then people see the results, right? Switzerland legalized heroin. Since then, there have been, more than 15 years ago now, since then there have been 0 heroin overdose deaths on legal heroin. None, not one person, right? More people have died of heroin overdoses in this country since we started talking than on legal heroin in all the years they've had it now in Switzerland. All these countries, because they help people, right? Policies based on shame, stigma, and punishment make addiction worse. Policies based on love, compassion, and regulating the market, bringing the market away from criminals and under control, massively reduce the problems. They're not a magic bullet, they still have some problems, but they work so much better.
Have you done any research on what they've done in Oregon?
Yeah, yes, this happened after my book.
Decriminalized and legalized all drugs
so
in
decriminalized,
2020.
yeah. So the difference between decriminalization...
Here in the United States.
Yeah,
so what has your research shown on that?
So I'll just explain the difference between decriminalization and legalization. Okay. So decriminalization is where you stop punishing users and people with addiction problems, but they still have to go to armed criminals to get their drugs.
Got it.
Legalization is where you open up some legal route for people to get their drugs. And that should be different for every drug, obviously. Okay. No one wants there to be a heroin aisle in CVS. That's not the answer, right?
Got it.
So Oregon can decriminalize. Unfortunately, they can't legalize because federal law.
Yeah. Gotcha. I mean, they have decriminalized.
Yeah, they've decriminalized.
So what has that shown?
So Oregon wasn't able to do what Portugal did so tightly, which is transfer the money they used to spend. But we know that the outcomes in Oregon are pretty promising at the moment. It's a very recent change compared to Portugal, where it's been in place for 17 years now. But we know everywhere else in the world that's done it has had radical improvements. And the truth is, you want to say anything in defense of the war on drugs, you can say one thing. We gave it a fair shot. We did it for 100 years. We spent $1 trillion. We imprisoned millions of our own citizens. We destroyed whole neighboring countries or close by countries like Colombia. And at the end of all that, we can't even keep drugs out of our prisons where we pay guards to walk around the wall perimeter the whole time. That strategy has been tested to destruction. There is no country in the world that anyone can point to where it has worked. There are loads of countries where policies based on love and compassion and order and regulation work. So at some point, we've got to stop copying the countries that have disastrously failed and start copying the places that have succeeded.
So if you enjoyed this little short segment from the podcast that we did, here's another short segment to watch. Or if you want to see the entire podcast, click over here. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.